Hi, this is John Linneball from John Linneball Tutoring, and this is my video for APUS History, number 62, Industrial Capitalism Creates the Gilded Age. Here's my contact information in the lower left corner, and you'll see it at the end as well. So let's move on. Why was it called the Gilded Age? Did it have anything to do with that comedian and SNL actress from the 1970s, Gilda Radner? It's always something. Rosanna Dana. If you don't know who that was, go look up Gilda Radner on YouTube. You'll enjoy it. But anyway, that had nothing to do with her. She died way too young. She was really talented. But that's not why it was called the Gilded Age. Why was it called the Gilded Age? Well, gilding was and still is a process of gluing gold leaf, that is extremely thin sheets of gold, to some non-gold cheap material, a cheap base metal, wood, plaster, so the item looks like it's solid gold even though it's not. And there are good reasons. One, solid gold is really soft or relatively soft as metals go, and it's really, really heavy besides being really expensive. So there are advantages to gilding things. But the whole idea is it makes something that's actually pretty cheap look really, really classy. Authors Mark Twain, that is Samuel Clemens, Mark Twain, the famous guy, and Charles Dudley invented that term for their 1873 book, The Gilded Age, A Tale of Today. So what superficially looked like a golden age of prosperity was, for many, an unpleasant age, gilded to appear golden. So the Gilded Age, again, refers to a time that looks like it was a golden age of prosperity, when some people had insane amounts of wealth, while others had relatively little or basically nothing. So there you go. Everything looked golden until you really looked at it. You're like, oh, this is actually kind of cheap and tacky and gross. All right, so let's move on. The Gilded Age in a nutshell. In the late 19th century, that is the late 1800s, the U.S. industrialized quickly. The results were massive cultural and societal changes. Work patterns changed, as did ethnic and economic class divisions. This is and was easiest to see in expanding northeastern and midwestern U.S. cities such as New York City, Chicago, Cleveland, Buffalo, Detroit, and the like. And you had a lot of factories and things that looked like this picture here. So let's move on. At the same time, the South and West were changed by developments from the end of the Civil War until the end of the 19th century, that is 1865 to 1899. I know we'll party like it's 1899. All right, most of you probably aren't old enough to remember Prince, but another good song, Party Like It's 1999. Anyway, the South was changed by the end of slavery, and you can see AP US History videos 58 through 61 in my series if you want to learn more about that. And the changes included Jim Crow laws and sharecropping. So not a great time for the South, all in all. In the Midwest and the West, government encouraged homesteading, allowed the Midwest to become a farming powerhouse, which led to a powerful pro-farmer political movement. As settlers moved into the West in search of more arable, that is, developable land that things could be grown on, they clashed with Native Americans who had already lost most of their independence and their land in these struggles. Gilded Age Industrialization. Industry was developed on an unprecedentedly large scale. There was consolidation of business. There was a development of communications for national and international trade, finance, etc. So things like the telegraph allowed businesses to communicate throughout the whole US and even internationally. And of course, there were massively pro-business laws being passed and enforced by all three of the branches of government. The legislatures passed them, the judicial, the courts enforced them. Well, they upheld them, is what I should say. And the enforcement, of course, was through the executive policies. So, yeah, we're all three branches of government that were very pro-business and made it a very friendly business environment. There were new forms of consumption and marketing resulting from mass industrialization, mass communication, and new social norms, which became normal. That's how they become norms. Anyway, and government policies, etc. Revolutions in transportation and communication. The federal government subsidized railroad and telegraph development from sea to shining sea. It was a good investment since it helped develop new markets across the continent and beyond. The idea you could move goods and people and whatever you wanted to from faraway places. So you could go from New York City eventually to San Francisco, for example. Railroads, land grants. The most important transportation improvement of the 1800s was the development of the railroads. Railroads made overland transport of goods and people faster than ever. How did rail companies develop these railroads? Well, there were grants, basically gifts of free land from the government through which the railroads would be developed. Most of these grants happened between 1851 and 1871. The Pacific Railway Act of 1862 expedited things by granting land to the companies directly rather than giving them to states who would presumably have given the land to the rail companies. So you can think of it as you might have seen in a TV commercial or something. We eliminate the middleman and pass the savings on to you. Basically, the federal government believed it would be more efficient, and I don't know, they're probably right. So those grants totaled over 175 million acres, which is more land than there is in the state of Texas. The grants let rail companies develop railroads that made huge profits, that is, new market disruptive technologies with very limited players, which led to gigantic profits for the players. Kind of like Silicon Valley. That's where I got that phrase from, is market disruptive. Whenever there's something that, wow, we have a new technology, just like railroads, a lot better than some trying to do something by stagecoach, or if the railroad goes through a place where there's no river, then you're really stuck. I mean, the only thing that's going to work is you have to use the railroad. If you don't like it, oh well. So that led to huge profits for the railroads. Telegraph and telephone. The federal government helped inventors and investors develop new telecommunications technologies by enforcing patents as generally described in the U.S. Constitution. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 8 of the Patent and Copyright Clause to the Constitution says Congress is empowered to promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. So the idea is, if you don't remember what that's about, you have copyright, so if you write a book, nobody can just go and automatically go copy it and then sell it for less than what you want to sell it for. Same thing with an invention. So as these things were developed, there was already a federal policy in place in the Constitution to handle this sort of inventiveness. The telegraph. The telegraph network started before the Civil War and continued to develop during the Gilded Age. In 1858, the first transatlantic The first transatlantic, I'll try it again, transatlantic. All right. Anyway, the first transatlantic cable was put in place, leading to telecommunications between North America and Europe. Jay Gould took over the U.S. telegraph industry in 1879 when he became CEO of Western Union, which still exists for money transfers but sent its telegram in 2006. Its very last telegram was in 2006. The telephone. We all know about the telephone. Alexander Graham Bell of the Bell System fame, which would later become AT&T, etc., was granted a patent for the telephone in 1876. There is a very interesting discussion of Bell's race with other inventors to patent the first practical telephone. You can see the Wikipedia article on Alexander Graham Bell if you would like to see that. There's a link down here, and it's also going to be in the description when I'm done making this video. While it's extremely common for more than one inventor to develop the same invention, honestly, because, well, prior art, basically all the things people did, more than one person, and sometimes lots of more than one person, can see, oh, okay, if we figure these things, how to put these things together, we can make something else from it. So it's really just going to be a race to see who does it first. However, there were some allegations that Bell's attorney unduly influenced a patent clerk who happened to be an alcoholic who owed Bell's attorney money. So, interesting, but we're going to move on. Anyway, whether those scandalous allegations were true or not, Bell prevailed and the Bell Telephone Company was developed within a year, so roughly 1877, and when 1880 ended, close to 50,000 phones were already in service in the U.S. As history showed us, the development of a telephone network helped corporations become national, if not international, business entities. You know of any business that doesn't use a phone? No, of course you don't. Well, there might be a few, but not too many. Mass production, distribution, and marketing. Many different factors led to an explosion in the production and consumption following the Civil War. Advances in technology, greater availability of raw materials, new business techniques, improved marketing techniques, and an increasing employable population led to the rise of mass production. Revolution in steelmaking. Improved steelmaking was crucial to the industrialization of the United States. As iron production increased in the 19th century, it was widely used to produce rails for railroads. However, steel, an alloy formed by chemically bonding carbon and iron, is and was superior to pure iron in practically every industrial application. For example, it outperformed and still does outperform iron in durability and versatility. Since steel was known since ancient times, why weren't train rails made of steel? Well, there was no known way to make steel cheaply enough to make it commercially viable. However, in 1856, Englishman Henry Bessemer discovered a process that did just that, blowing air into molten steel. The Bessemer method was pretty soon replaced by a better method called the open hearth process by the late 1860s. Coal and oil fuel industrialization. Coal. Well, with new industrial processes, they had to find fuel that could be used en masse to use in heavy industry. Anthracite, that is hard coal, found in quantity in western Pennsylvania, satisfied that need, as bituminous, that is soft coal, would do in processes that followed that. Of course, coal produces ridiculous amounts of nasty black soot that gets on everything. That was so disruptive that it actually put population or evolutionary pressure on moths in England. The idea was the white moths that generally dominated before heavy industry came in contrasted too much with the sooty environment and were easy prey, so dark moths reproduced more. Industrial towns in the United States also rarely had brightly colored houses because of the same coal soot until the Clean Act of 1970 was passed. Not kidding about that. My mother told me about that. I was born in 1970, and she just said, well, before you were born in our town, there were very few, brightly colored houses. Basically everybody's house was black or gray or something like that because of all the soot that came from factories that were nearby. So 3 cheers for the Clean Air Act because I really like the bright yellow house that I grew up in. All right. And that reminds me of when I booked a flight on Continental Airlines when that airline still existed before it was bought out by United. I remember calling the, whatever you want to call him, the agent, and I told him, hey, I'm flying to Buffalo. And he said, well, don't eat the black snow. And I said, well, don't you mean don't eat the yellow snow? And he said, no, I've been to Buffalo before, back in the 1960s. Don't eat the black snow. So, anyway, another saying that I've heard from Western New York was soot on the windowsill means bread on the table. So people had to take the bad along with the good. They said, well, all right, if we didn't have soot on the windowsill, we wouldn't have a job, so that would mean we wouldn't have bread on the table. All right, let's move forward. Modern management and corporations develop. In the antebellum, that is pre-Civil War period, several U.S. states relaxed the legal standards for incorporation. Incorporating in 1846, the Pennsylvania Railroad was one of the first U.S. corporations. After the Civil War, many new corporations were founded. Corporations created an upper management level, what corporations now call the C-suite for chief executives. For example, chief executive officer, chief financial officer, separate from those who manage daily operations. While a division of labor is useful in any organization and necessary in a large-scale operation, you can see any Dilbert cartoon for literal illustrations of why this is not always a good thing. Basically, when you have a separation between the C-suite and everybody else, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. Ideally, C-suite executives would listen to the experts on given subjects, but they often don't. So, here we have revenue is dropping, but don't panic. We have a new strategy that will fix everything. How do you know it's a good strategy? I can tell by looking at it. Why don't all failing companies create great new strategies and become profitable? Good question. Maybe it's because no one can tell a good strategy from a bad one, but acting like you do gets you a bigger paycheck. All right, so let's move on. Modern management and corporations develop. What to know? Corporate structures are supposed to use special workers to achieve goals and work well with others in the company. For example, the C-suite executives and accountants interface with managers who direct those in production. That is the rank and file, the people who actually produce something. You also need to know that the development of the modern corporation created job opportunities for secretaries and other office workers, leading to job opportunities for women and others who previously would not have held industrial jobs. As the U.S. developed, production went from the home or putting out system. You can see AP U.S. History videos 39 through 40 in my series, to factory production, causing a larger volume of goods to be available. As the earning power of the working class increased, purchasing patterns changed. Families who'd previously made homemade clothing and grown vegetables at home could now choose to buy store-bought clothes and canned or preserved food. This also allowed and allows people to spend more time at work rather than at home making food or clothing. Notice that the old ways of making things sometimes become popular with the wealthy because having custom clothing that they made or food that they or you grew yourself at home is trendy and nice, whereas it's necessary for the poor. So here we have, if you've seen Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul, here's Hank Schrader, that character, making his famous Schraderbrow, yes, Schraderbrow. Anyway, homebrewing is one thing that people do as a hobby that other people might have to if they would, you know, probably back in the old days, a lot of people home brewed because that was the only way that they could get beer that they could afford. All right, let's move on. Chain retail stores began to supplement and even supplant, that is, replace traditional local small stores. Starting at the end of the 19th century, supermarkets like the Atlantic and Pacific Tea Company, or A&P, and mass marketers of mass-produced, in quotes, dry goods, such as Woolworths, which was one of the first, in quotes, five and dime stores, to undercut the prices charged by local retailers. The idea was, nickels and dimes were worth a lot more back then, but still a lot of things, at local stores, little stores, they had to charge more because they didn't have mass purchasing power, etc., to get prices that were lower. Anyway, the five and dime, those were some of the first mass merchandisers. Today we have Target and things like that. Anyway, this would be repeated with local retailers and big box stores. So just what I'm talking about, you can think from at least the 2000 to the present, we've had problems with Walmart taking over Anytown's, USA's, Main Street. So you have little stores going out of business because there's a Walmart just a little ways out of town or a little bit away from the main street that everybody goes and buys things at. So the mom and pop stores go out of business. And here's an article about Woolworths if you want to know the history of that. That's a chain that basically went out of business because they were, outcompeted by the more upstart ones like, say, Target and Walmart. All right, let's move on. Wealthier consumers soon had department stores where they could find expensive prestige items that put the conspicuous in conspicuous consumption. The idea that you could make sure that other people could see you bought an expensive brand of clothing or any other consumer good, anything you might buy, so that way people would say, ooh, you have the expensive one, not just a regular one. Famous examples of these stores were and are Macy's in New York City, which later expanded to many U.S. cities in the 1990s, and Neiman Marcus, which is often derisively called needless markup, in Dallas, Texas, and several other U.S. cities such as San Francisco, although I think San Francisco's just recently went out of business. But let's move on. Rural consumers could also purchase ready-made goods by mail order rather than making them themselves or traveling to purchase the goods. Sears Roebuck, perhaps the best-known mail-order catalog, listed all the products they sold, which included such items as prefabricated houses as well as ordinary items, such as clothing. They also encouraged purchasers to buy their products on installment plans. Sears was basically the pre-internet's Amazon, although Sears managed to almost completely squander the obvious head start it could have had in online marketing. See, for example, this website here, which describes the ultimate reasons for the downfall of Sears at retailmarketingtechnology.com. The industrial or Gilded Age labor force. Its growing industry made a labor force necessary. And no, I don't mean the Aqua Teen hunger force. Meet wide, get the honeys, G. Meet wide, make the money, C. All right, no. Anyway, the antebellum workforce was from Northern and Western Europe, that is, Britain, the Germanic states like Prussia, etc. After the Civil War, immigrants were mostly from Southern and Eastern Europe, like Italy or Poland or Mexico or China. And yes, they were not. Mexico and China are not in Southern and Eastern Europe. So I mean Southern and Eastern Europe, comma, Mexico and China. Until The Chinese Exclusion Act was passed in 1882, so that stopped immigration from China to the U.S. basically until that law was no longer enforced. Employers hired recruiters to convince people to move from these places to the U.S. Workers were like indentured servants. They reimbursed employers from their wages. This practice became illegal in 1885, but immigrants kept coming. It makes sense. Once the first immigrant wave came from a given country, others would follow their friends from the old country, right? The divide between poverty and wealth. During the decades after the Civil War, communities were increasingly industrialized and divided between the rich and the poor. The working class and the poor worked long hours for long wages, but they were still better off financially than they had been before the Civil War. While the wages were low, mass production lowered the cost of goods, so even though working class people didn't make that much money, they could still afford to buy things that were previously unavailable to them. Work was still subject to slumps due to panics or just seasonal downturns, but still the working poor still made more money than they had in the rural areas in the US or foreign countries where they lived before that. So all in all, industrialization was pretty good for the poor, even though it was much better for the rich. The wealthy. After the Civil War, an affluent class of people, wealthier than had ever been seen, developed. These people had enough money to build opulent mansions in urban neighborhoods and similarly unbelievably extravagant, wealthy, opulent mansions or summer homes or cottages in places that were a little cooler in the summer. So places like Newport, Rhode Island. So you can think of Mr. Pewterschmidt from Family Guy. He lived in Newport, Rhode Island, I believe. The economist and social commentator Thorstein Veblen, in his 1899 book, The Leisure Class, invented the term conspicuous consumption to describe the way the wealthy people displayed their social class by spending on things that showed they were wealthy. Like we were talking about before, that you would go to Macy's to buy really expensive things so you could show people, hey, I have this really expensive clothing that you don't. Ha ha ha. More modern conspicuous consumption. Conspicuous consumption, while it was first described in the 1890s, it definitely was used again. That is, the term was used again in the 1980s and to the present to describe rappers, yuppies, etc. Just about anybody who really, really wants to have a conspicuous, really obvious, hi, I have this expensive special brand name item rather than your ordinary one that anyone has. And so, as you might guess, these brands appeal to the wealthy, usually the nouveau riche, that is the new rich, and those who are poor but want to appear wealthy. So you have people like, you have a rapper who's rapping about my Adidas and da-da-da. Then, of course, everybody who wants to look like they're a real baller, hey, I have an Adidas sweatshirt. I have this really expensive, pair of Adidas shoes or anything, Anybody's running shoes, doesn't matter what brand they are, but, they're going to have expensive ones, so people can say, hey, I'm not poor. I have this, $200 pair of sneakers. And if you are Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul fans, you might remember Ken, the investment banker who gets conned by Saul Goodman in Better Call Saul, and also is the victim of a little nasty prank by Walter White, when Walter White is annoyed by this guy who's just being a real jerk. And of course, he's a very loud investment banker who's going on and on about how much money he has and how much money he's going to make and blah, blah, blah. And of course, he drives a BMW, which is a car that people often buy for its conspicuous consumption. It's like, I have a really expensive car, and you can tell because, look, it has a BMW decal on it. Anyway, let's move on. Warning, dangerous ideas. You can stop here if you want. The last part of this video is a discussion of the modern Gilded Age we live in today. If you're really conservative, for example, if you think the original Gilded Age was a pretty good idea and poor people are mostly poor because they're lazy, or just in general, if you're a MAGA person, and you don't want to consider other points of view, then you probably shouldn't watch the rest of this video, even though I think in general you really should, because if you have these ideas, you really need to be exposed to better ideas. If you're more normal, then the following section may help you when you're answering essay questions on your AP exams, for your AP courses, etc., and when you are considering political candidates when you vote in the future. Basically, the ideas I'm going to discuss with you are really only radical if you believe Republicans like Eisenhower from the 1950s were, in quotes, radical. Even Reagan would be too radical for today's GOP, the modern Republican Party. Many say we are in a new Gilded Age. U.S. taxes on corporations and extremely wealthy individuals are at an all-time low, at least since the institution of the income tax in 1909, which would basically be an all-time low unless there was some other tax other than the income tax that was really, really high on corporations and wealthy people, and pretty sure there wasn't. But if someone can prove me wrong, hey, go for it. I don't have an ego about this. Anyway, this has allowed some Americans to become multi-billionaires. It is likely that we will have a few trillionaires in the next decade. So you can see this article I have below. The link is going to be in the description. So some of the wealthiest people are Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and Larry Ellison. Larry Ellison. And most of these people have made a lot of money in the computer-related industries. Musk, it's more, Tesla and some other things, but I think Tesla's the only thing that really made money from him. That's sort of tech, it's tech-related. It's not really computer, but electric cars, hey, that's great. Anyway, so they're among the 5 richest people in the world. All right. So you might be asking, well, hey, John, aren't you just jealous that these people have all sorts of money and you don't? That's not very nice of you. And the answer is, yeah, of course, I'm a little jealous of them, but the point is they got their money and they're really not being taxed fairly. What do I mean by that? Well, all right, if we look at the Economic Policy Institute's writing here, net productivity grew about 1.33% each year between 1973 and 2014, which is faster than the meager 0.2% annual rise in median hourly compensation. So in other words, as monetized, as basically evaluated, made into a number, you're increasing the amount that you produce by 1.33%, but you're only getting 0.2% extra compensation for it. So you're working harder for less money, essentially. Though, in essence, about 15% of productivity growth between 1973 and 2014 translated into higher hourly wages and benefits for the typical American worker. Or in other words, average workers increase their output by about 6.5 times their increase in pay. So they're working a lot harder and really not being paid much in return for it. So that's why I have a problem with the current system and the 5 richest people in the world. The 5est. That'd be kind of cool. We're the 5est. But anyway, let's C-suite compensation has skyrocketed. Pay for CEOs, that is heads of corporations, and others in the C-suite, that is the group of people in upper management, the board of directors, etc., has also increased ridiculously at the same time. CEO pay has skyrocketed 1,460% since 1978. CEOs were paid 399 times as much as a typical worker in 2021, and that's also from the Economic Policy Institute. And you can see the links to that here, and they'll also be in the description. You can also see Grafe, in quotes, Bud's, Crystal's book, In Search of Excess, the Overcompensation of American Executives from 1991, and practically anything written by any journalist with a shred of intellectual honesty since the 1980s or so. And you can see the Wikipedia article on Grafe Crystal if you'd like to learn more about him. I really liked that book, In Search of Excess, so strongly suggest you read it if you can. It's not a very long book, wouldn't take you that long to read. Some corporations support social programs. That is, as long as they don't have to pay for them. For example, Walmart supports public health insurance. While that's a great idea, it's probably not because Sam Walton's heirs are really generous people. If Walmart doesn't have to pay health insurance because the government pays for it through taxes, and Walmart pays very low taxes, who pays for Walmart employee health care? Let's think about that for a second, and the answer is you do. So that means they get a tax break at Walmart so they can underpay people, so then you can make it up with your taxes that you actually paid. Remember, only you can prevent criminal corporate ripoffs. Corporations are socializing costs while keeping profits for themselves. Insurance is also a form of socializing losses for people who pay for insurance. The difference is that insurance is paid for using the insured's money. So when you have privatized profits, when the profits are there, so they're making money, that's private. That belongs to the company. But when the economy tanks and they lose money, oh, we all need to pay for it. You have to bail us out. You've seen that a number of times now since 2007. And even before that, there were many bailouts for different industries, etc. I can remember Lee Iacocca and Chrysler in 1983 or so, where they bailed out Chrysler to keep it from going under. Anyway, let's not do that. It doesn't make sense to privatize profits and socialize losses and then call that capitalism. It's just not. It's crony capitalism. It just means it's not what you know, it's who you know, and people who have connections make money while everybody else gets to help them make money. Not exactly fair, is it? Will child labor laws and OSHA go away? Well, there was a Louisiana legislator who owns a bunch of Smoothie Kings, or at least one anyway. He was trying to get a law passed in Louisiana saying that teenage employees couldn't get breaks. So it says here, young workers could lose their lunch breaks under proposed law. And this is from the Louisiana Illuminator. That's a hard one to say, Louisiana Illuminator. Anyway, those are things. You can look that up in the link in the description. But the big points are, okay, there could be a possible repeal of mandatory 30-minute meal breaks on shifts of 5 hours or more. Because, gee, no employer would try to coerce impressionable and a little bit naive teenagers into waiving their meal breaks. And here's a BS alert. Wilder said his businesses will continue to offer meal breaks to minors as he believes they would quit otherwise. He argued that the free market will ensure workers are treated fairly. His bill is necessary, he said, to eliminate paperwork the current law provides. How much paperwork is this? I mean, isn't that just something normal? I mean, at most you might have to check off some form saying you had your break. I don't even think you have to do that. You just have to give them the break. Give me a break, man! Anyway, This reminds me of a long time ago when I had a job at 7-Eleven. That was my first kind of official job that looked like a job, wasn't just mowing lawns or shoveling snow or something like that. Was just, so they signed me up, and that was one of the things that the Southland Corporation, I had to do some paperwork with them. It said, volunteer hours are prohibited. And I was, 17 at the time, thinking like, okay, why would anyone want to work volunteer hours? And as I got older, I figured out, oh, because if they could get away with that, then they could pressure people who are teenagers or otherwise, not so powerful and could be influenced by their boss because they need the job to say, oh, you're right, I'll volunteer to work extra hours and you don't have to pay me for that. That's why we have labor laws in the first place, is so people can't be coerced, or meaning forced into doing things like this, being pressured into not getting their meal breaks or working for less than the minimum wage, etc. But let's move on. Will child labor laws and OSHA go away? So, as Debbie Berkowitz, an attorney from the National Employment Law Project, stated, the Congressional Review Act resolution that passed the House and is now being considered by the Senate would repeal an OSHA rule clarifying the responsibility of large employers in dangerous industries to complete and accurate injury records. So fundamentally, this is about whether the government can sanction, that is, punish employers in the most dangerous industries for hiding serious workplace injuries and keeping fraudulent records. The OSHA clarifying rule does not impose any new costs or obligations on employers, nor does it affect small businesses. The rule only covers larger employers in the most dangerous industries. This rule does not kill jobs, it prevents jobs from killing people. If OSHA cannot enforce injury record-keeping requirements, underreporting will proliferate and worker health and safety will pay the job. Rather than doing the business of corporate lobbyists, the Senate should stand with its nation's workers and oppose any attempt to repeal this rule. So we can compare that to an industry opinion piece from Stephen E. Sandher, the CEO of the Associated General Contractors of America. So basically he says that the only thing that will change with the repeal of this OSHA rule is that OSHA will have to abide by the 6-month statute of limitations established in the OSHA Act for finding firms for record-keeping violations. Even better, repealing this needless new regulatory burden will allow construction safety professionals to continue spending the majority of their time on project job sites, making sure workers are safe instead of in offices reviewing years-old records and cutting checks to OSHA. Okay, that's going to always be the industry, the employer's thing is, oh, it's not efficient. Oh, it's a great waste of money, which is fine, but we're talking about a 6-month statute of limitations. So what that says to me is, hey, if we get away with a violation after 6 months, there's nothing you can do about it. Wow, that certainly does not create any incentives at all for them to cut corners, and I'm being sarcastic. Yes, it just means, hey, do whatever you want, leave bogus records, because after 6 months, if they don't catch you after 6 months, there's nothing they can do about it. So hopefully laws like this won't get passed, but unfortunately, if we continue down the path of the new Gilded Age, a lot of these things are going to get passed. So please do get involved. When you're old enough to vote, do vote, and please make sure that you vote for things like occupational health and safety. We don't need people losing limbs on the job and things like that. Sorry about the rant, but it's important to me. Happy holidays? Well, maybe not. Similarly, low-paid Walmart employees have received charitable contributions from organizations who bought them holiday presents, household necessaries, and other things like that from the Walmarts where they work. John D. Rockefeller and Sam Walton would be proud. I can't find the source of the Christmas shopping story, but I know I read it, And that's basically what it was, is these people said, oh, we'll pick out some things from Walmart, and feel, oh, I know where it is. I work at this Walmart. So you can also see the link to Walmart, the high cost of low price. That's a really good documentary about Walmart. And it's just evidence of Walmart encouraging employees to apply for government assistance. And that's a problem. So, what can you do? Well, we want to stop the new Gilded Age. The best way to do it is to support unions. They're the people who brought you the weekend, and they're the ones who helped force employers to actually give people humane working hours, etc. People are actually working a lot now, which is weird because people are much more productive than they were in the 70s, and doesn't make a lot of sense unless you're actually giving some of the money that came from that productivity actually to the workers who produce things. So the best way is to end the second Gilded Age and to ensure safety, humane working conditions, etc. Organize as workers did to end the first Gilded Age. White-collar workers are not immune. You can see Elon Musk's demand to employees at X, that's Twitter before Musk overpaid for it and seriously downgraded it because, well, probably because he realized how much money he had just wasted needlessly. But anyway, you can see the Service Employees International Union, SEIU, for things like that. Basically, it's a very important union, and they are helping so all workers can bargain for a better life and can enjoy the life and not have to be at work all the time and not get injured at work, etc. So let's move on. Find this video useful? If you did, please like it and subscribe to my channel. Neither action costs you anything. You'll be alerted about my new videos. If you saw an ad during this video, please know that I didn't get any of it. And what I mean by it is I didn't get any of the ad revenue from that. And I won't until I have the subscribers and the view time that YouTube demands. Why? Well, YouTube won't share any ad revenue with me until I have 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 hours. That's 240,000 minutes of view time in a year. While I have over 1,000 subscribers, I don't have 4,000 hours of watch time. Why is that important for me to get ad money? Well, ad money will help me make more videos. For the same reasons, you are not only welcome, but you are encouraged. So you're not only welcome, but you're encouraged. Not trying to say that you're not welcome. You are not only welcome, but encouraged to share links to this video, put it in playlists, etc. I will gladly read and respond to constructive criticism or suggestions for new videos. I do, however, reserve the right to delete comments such as troll, post, or spam. You can also hire me for tutoring. And thanks for watching. You can contact me on Facebook, Instagram, email, phone, and a couple other ways. So Facebook, just come and check me out at www.facebook.com/Linnaball Tutoring. Instagram.com/John.Linnaball.tutoring. Cell is 415-623-4251. And my office phone at my tutoring business is 415-986-7355. You can email me at john@johnlinnaball.com. And my website is johnlinnaball.com, or you can go to johnlinnaballtutoring.com. They'll both take you to the same website. I am also on locals.com at testpreparation.locals.com. You can also find me on lbry.tv at johnlinnaball.tutoring. And if you want to send me actual paper snail mail, you can mail me at John Linnaball Tutoring, 1859 Powell Street, number 109, San Francisco, California, 94133. Hope you're having a good day. Hope you enjoyed this video. And if you did, please like, subscribe, and share, as everybody on YouTube tells you. All right, have a good one.